Click here to subscribe our channel and do not forget to press the bell icon to get regular updates of our videos. Hello friends, good evening to all of you. So I am back with another video on sociology optional subject for UPSC CSE means examination. This video we are going to cover the concept of social mobility, understudy deviation mobility. We are seeing open and closed system, types of mobility, sources and causes of mobility. So friend, please do this as it will really motivate me to continue this awesome course. Share as much as possible so that more and more people will get benefit. Comment and like the video and ask any doubt if you have. And now you can also follow us on FB page, that is facebook.com/unorthodox academy. So friend, as you know that we are covering slot 3, that is deviation, caste and class, and at paper 1 we are going to finish that topic of 5th, that is deviation mobility. We have already covered its concept, theories of social deviation, dimension of social deviation. By this video we are going to finish by covering social mobility. Then in paper 2 we have to see these two topics, that is caste system and social classes in India. So first we see the term social mobility. So basically the term social mobility is introduced in sociology by Petrim Sorokin, who is an Russian sociologist, and used this term in his book The Cultural Dynamics. So in social stratification, that means different strata in the society. Then in every society different groups are placed or given a social position on the basis of some cultural or social basis, and accordingly they are assigned privileges and disadvantages. So when individual or group ensures changes of social provision in social hierarchy, then it is known as social mobility. For example, if we consider Indian Hindu Varna system, then there are 4 Varnas, that is Brahmin, Shudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya. So a person who is born in Kshatriya Varna will always be remain in Kshatriya Varna. He will not able to mobilize himself to Brahmin or Vaishya or Shudras. So now we see there are 2 types of social mobility, open and closed system of social mobility. So the social mobility will always depend upon the social systems, and if the social structure is open, then it provides no hindrance to the chances of social mobility, whereas the closed system don't provide the opportunity of social mobility. In the context of social mobility, basically there are 2 types of social system which are identified. The first one is closed and the second one is open system. So in a closed system, the best example of closed system is Indian caste system, that is Indian Hindu Varna systems. And basically in closed system, individual position is largely ascribed, that is fixed by birth. And in open system, the social mobility is possible between different social classes. For example, there are 3 social classes according to social stratification. These are upper, middle and lower classes. And a person who is in middle class, by its hard work or achievement, he is able to mobilize to upper class. So the position in this stratification system basically depends more on achieved status, and achieved status is a sociological term which denotes social positions that a person can acquire on the basis of merit, and it is a position that is earned or chosen. It reflects the personal skill, abilities and efforts. For example, the achieved status are being an Olympic athlete. So a person achieved a status of Olympic athlete when he performs very good in Olympics. Being a criminal or being a college professor, so according to his personal abilities and efforts, then a person's status will be decided in open system. So basically theoretically societies are open or closed, but practically no society is completely open or closed. So Lockheed and Goldthorpe in their study of black coated workers found that the lower class do not get easily acceptance in the middle class in spite of their economic achievement. So when a middle class achieve, or basically a lower class achieve economic achievements by working hard, so they will move to the middle class in terms of economic achievement. But it might be possible they are rejected by middle class because they are newly rich means newly rich. And this is that's why when we can say that open system of social mobility cannot be practically fully open. So they also found that in schools, offices are different and unfriendly environment, and they believe that they are not accepted by middle class. So caste, race and gender based social stratifications are the example of closed social systems, and these society do not offer any opportunity of social mobility. But practically no system can be closed enough to provide social mobility to its members, because in any closed system some individuals can assure social mobility through their efforts. For example, a term which is introduced by Amin Srinivas, that is sensitization. So basically in sensitizations, the lower classes imitates the norms and values of upper caste by keeping social mobility in their mind. And there is another terms in closed systems or closed class system. So in closed system, the persons will move to the upper caste or other varnas by syncretizations, by migration, which is the term coined by David F. Foucault, conversion by Yogendra Singh, and royal proclamations were some of the means of social mobility within the caste system. So hence we can say that open and closed system is a relative concept. Closed system provides little opportunity for social mobility, whereas open system has least hindrance. But as you know that practically no society is fully open or closed. So now we see the types of mobility. So Sorokin identified basically two types of social mobility. First one is vertical, and so second one is horizontal. So vertical is also divided in two, that is social upward social mobility, and the second one is downward social mobility. So basically first see the terms of vertical social mobility. So when individual or group moves in the social ladder in terms of gains or loss or in the social position, then it is known as vertical mobility. So we can say that it is basically in terms of economic achievement. So when a person's and upward social mobility can also be seen as social climbing, and downward social mobility can also be seen as social sinking. So in upward social mobility, when a person achieves in terms of money, power, privileges, then the previous one it is awarded. And for example, when we consider a petty bourgeois or a small businessman, and due to their efforts they will become capitalist. And in downward social mobility, a capitalists become poor or become a petty bourgeois. So it signifies that when individual or group loses in terms of money, power, privileges than the previous one, then it will become downward social mobility. So now we see the horizontal social mobility, and basically it involves moving within the same status category. So when individual changes his place, occupation, etc., but not necessarily do not get changes in their social positions, then it is known as horizontal social mobility. For example, when an officer get transferred from one place to another, or a rickshaw puller becomes wage earner, so there is only horizontal social mobility, and there is no vertical social mobility because her positions will not be changed. And Lipset and Benedicts also identified two types of social mobility, and these are intragenerational, that is within a generations, and intergenerational social mobility, that means between the generations. So in intergenerational social mobility, and it is also be termed as career mobility, and it is within a generation. For example, when a person for example is working in office, so it might be possible he can make different career in his life by becoming a businessman, because so it will this will ensure that individual ensures social climbing or social sinking in their own lives. So it can be says that it is a mix up of vertical mobility, because in vertical mobility there is both things, that is social climbing, that is means upward vertical mobility, and social sinking, that means downward social mobility. So in this, a generation will do a single generation, that means within his own life a person can mobilize. And intergenerational mobility, basically it refers to social mobility between generations. So it is basically measured by comparing occupational status of sons with that of father, and it is only rarely the occupational status of father mother within that of their daughter. For example, a son farmers become an IS and vice versa. So now we see the sources and causes of social mobility. So basically there are two factors, structural factors and individual factors. And for example, structural changes can be economic boom or depressions, whereas individual factors are the skills and traits of an individual person. So first we see the structural factors, and in this we have two types of structural factors. First one is occupational structure, and second one mobility barriers. So when societies differ in the relative proportion of high and low status positions which is need to be filled, a society with a primary agriculture and extractive economy, For example, mining and forestry, and we can say that it is a primary sector of India of the economy, and then it will have many low status and few high status positions, and mobility will be lower in the primary sector of the economy, and the rate of mobility rises with the degree of industrialization. That means it become a tertiary sector, then, or we can say secondary sector economically. Then in the both the capitalist and socialist countries it can be happen. So most people in the developing countries are still in agriculture and extractive economy, leaving limited opportunity of for upward mobility. Then the second point is mobility barriers, and even in a relatively open class society, upward mobility is not open equal to everyone. For example, middle class children typically have learning experience which are more helpful in gaining upward mobility than the experience of lower class children. So conflict theory scholars maintains that credentials, that means certificate, recommendations, the old boy network basically means here when the friends or the seniors of your colleges will help you in the or give recommendations to their fact in their jobs, and they will try to provide you jobs, and over discriminations against racial and ethnic minorities and lower classes person seriously limits the upward mobility while protecting the children of the upper classes from downward mobility. So these are the factors which hinders the downward mobility in the upper classes. So now we see the individual factors. So while structural factors may determine the proportion of high status well paid positions in society, individual factors also greatly affect which person will get them. So first one is ability difference. So other things being equal and talented usually earn more than the untalented. So it is also not known that not all the people are equally talented. So while it is impossible to measure individual ability differences satisfactorily, so we assume that they are important factors in life successes and mobility. So the second one is second one is mobility oriented behavior, and it includes four types, that is education, work habits, and deferred gratification pattern. And the fourth one is mobility game playing. So first we see the education. So basically it is an important mobility ladder, because even a well paid working class job is hard to find unless one can read directions and do simple arithmetics. So if we consider Americans people, then 1 in 5 Americans are functionally illiterate, and it does not mean that when you are an educated it not makes you it might be possible that you are educated but functionally you are illiterate and you cannot perform better. So for many careers the greatest value of education lies not in the particular knowledge and skills it provides, but in cultivating one's ability to locate and use information as it is needed. So the second term is work habits. So as you know that there are sometimes overlooked as a mobility factors, and these are basically work habits are sometimes overlooked as mobility factors, and one recent study concludes that work habits learned in early childhood are the most important for all the eventual successes and well-being. So for a person who is from childhood, basically there is no guarantee of upward mobility as hard work carries, but many achieves upward mobility without it. As you know that hard work is a basics for the upward mobility, and there are only few persons who will get upward mobility without being hard working. So now the third point we see that deferred gratification pattern. So basically the DGP is not more affected in the upper classes or the upper capitalists, because in this a person needs to postpone his immediate satisfaction in order to gain some later goal. So it is mainly the middle class may have the most to gain through the DGP, because they are middle class and there is mobility of them to become upper class. But in upper class there is only one thing, that they need to maintain their positions, and in middle class they have to improve, so they have to defer their gratifications. So now the fourth factor is the mobility game playing, and this have received very little study, but it seems likely that a good deal of game playing and artful presentation of self may be involved in upward mobility, because graduating seniors are coached on how to conduct themselves before the corporate recruiter, because if they present themselves well then they then they will surely get jobs, and to be well liked may be as important as to be competent, because a skillful presentation of self will seldom take the place of competence, but it may gain once a chance to demand competence and thus be a factor in mobility. So basically this decision on source and causes of mobility has basically centered upon upward mobility, but the same determinants also produce downward mobility, and the structural factors in declining, such as declining industries, a stagnant economy with declining productivity, declining rate of economic growth, and technological changes tend to increase the total number of persons who must lose class status, and then it will lead to a downward mobility. And the individual factors that lead to downward mobility are the educations, work habits, and the other determine which persons suffer class status decline. So thank you guys for listening and watching this video. Thank you.